علم ربي من سؤالي واختياري.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'm Bilkis Khalifa and I welcome you all to the first episode of Pearls of Paradise. In this program, I'll be bringing you a series of stories of our great women who sacrificed their strength towards the propagation of this deen that you and I are enjoying today. As a matter of fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised them Jannah while they were still on this earth. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about one of these great women who is known as Khadija bint Khuwaylid. Khadija bint Khuwaylid was an industrious woman. She was a courageous woman. She was a woman of integrity. Indeed, she was really a great woman. Due to this, the folks of Mecca used to refer to her as the Princess of Mecca. Khadija bint Khuwaylid was a young widow who devoted to the upbringing of her children. Since the father was a great businessman in Mecca, after the father passed away, Nana Khadija radiallahu anha decided to inherit this business from the father. Khadija bint Khuwaylid radiallahu anha was an industrious businesswoman who was engaging into business with some of the men of Mecca. But unfortunately, their business efforts wasn't so pleasing to her. Immediately, when she heard of the integrity and principled behavior of our noble Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this great woman granted the Prophet a job offer. And since the Prophet Muhammad was also interested into business, the Prophet Muhammad gladly accepted this business offer. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam first business trip with Nana Khadija was the journey to Sham, that's Syria. Nana Khadija radiallahu anha was having a trusted slave known as Maysara. Maysara was being delegated to accompany and serve the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam during this business trip. So when the Prophet and Maysara went to Sham, they were engaging into the business. Everything was going on well for them. But Maysara was so observant to the extent that he was able to see some interesting thing about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He saw some miraculous events about the Prophet as well, where he even sees clouds providing shade over Prophet's head. Maysara was astounded by the remarkable scenes he witnessed on their business trip. Indeed, that business trip was an extremely profitable venture for Nana Khadija. Maysara and the Prophet Muhammad, upon their return from the business trip, Maysara reported his business experience with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Nana Khadija. After Nana Khadija hearing this report from Maysara, she was deeply moved and impressed, and she started thinking of proposing marriage to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it was somehow difficult for Nana Khadija to make a step in that, because Nana Khadija had already received some marriage proposal from some men of Quraysh, but she didn't accept their proposal. Due to this, Nana Khadija was having one good friend known as Nafisa. She discussed this issue with Nafisa, and Nafisa told Nana Khadija that she would go and approach the Prophet and deliver her intention to the Prophet. So Nafisa went to meet the Prophet, and they did this discussion about the marriage proposal. After the discussion with the Prophet accepted Khadija's proposal. So after this, Nafisa and Khadija, together with all the families, made the official arrangement of this marriage, and they got married, living happily as couples. After some years back, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Nana Khadija with 6 beautiful children, 4 daughters and 2 sons. The 4 daughters were Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima, and the 2 sons were Qasim and Abdullah. But unfortunately, Qasim and Abdullah passed away during their infant age. So looking at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Nana Khadija, the Prophet was an orphan. Nana Khadija too has lost both parents, and they've all lost some relatives as well, and now losing of their own children. So this was really a great loss to them. But because they were believers, they were able to understand that it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for that matter, they need to have patience with that. So as a believer, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you with death, you have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just want to test your faith. For that matter, you need to have patience whenever you lose your loved one, whether being your mother or your father or any relative at all. It got to a time that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided to visit a cave known as Cave of Hira, where the Prophet goes there for prayers and meditation. One day, while the Prophet was there praying and meditating, he felt the presence of an unusual being, and that being held him so tightly that he couldn't do anything. The being was commanding the Prophet that, Ikra, Ikra, that means read, read. The Prophet was shivering. He was really afraid. When you go to Quran chapter 96, verse 1 to 5, the details of what happened can be found there. So after the disappearance of the unusual being, the Prophet rushed home. When he got home, he was shouting, Zamiluni, Zamiluni, that means cover me up, cover me up. Khadija, being so good a wife, asked the husband that my husband, what's the matter, and the Prophet narrated his experience in the Cave of Hira to the wife. Nana Khadija consoled the husband that, my husband, you are never a bad person. You've never done any evil to anybody. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you with something that is above you. So don't panic, don't worry. So because of this smoothing and encouraging words of sympathy and understanding from Nana Khadija, it gave the Prophet immeasurable strength and confidence. So as couples or as husband or wife, whenever you are in the house with your husband and your husband comes home that, my wife, today I'm going through some trauma, you don't have to shout at your husband. You have to say some words of encouragement to your husband. You have to console your husband. Especially we women of today, when you're after hearing these words of encouragement from Nana Khadija radiallahu anha, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was really okay. Nana Khadija was having a cousin known as Waraka bin Nawfal. Nana Khadija and the Prophet went to meet this man, and this man was able to tell that being who visited the Prophet in the Cave of Hira was Angel Gabriel, that's Jibril. And Waraka bin Nawfal told that the unusual being that visited the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Cave of Hira was Angel Gabriel, and for that matter, that's a sign of prophethood to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It got to a time that the disbelievers realized that Islam was trending so much. So they decided to declare an open and total economic boycott. Where children face starvation, adults could even survive with the eating of leaves of trees. So imagine Nana Khadija, who has been raised in the home of luxury, now also facing this economic hardship as well. But due to how great she was able to face this economic hardship with patience and courage. Khadija's nobility of character made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to even send greetings from Angel Gabriel to the Prophet to be delivered to this great woman. Nana Khadija radiallahu anha passed away 3 years after Hijrah. That is the migration of the Prophet from Mecca to Medina. When Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Nana Khadija in the throes of death, the Prophet consoled Nana Khadija and he said, Allah has ordained it. Aisha radiallahu anha, who is one wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, also said that the Prophet even used to send some gift to Khadija's friend. Whenever the Prophet slaughtered any animal in the house, whether being it goat or sheep, the Prophet would send some of the meat to Khadija's friends. The Prophet used to say that I have great regard for her friends as well, as she has a special place in my heart. Aisha radiallahu anha again said, she never experienced such a feeling of natural feminine jealousy for any other wife of the Prophet than Nana Khadija radiallahu anha. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised her qualities and then pray for her forgiveness as well. So looking at Nana Khadija radiallahu anha, she was really a great woman. Indeed, because of how great she was so humble enough to propose love to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this shows how humility she was. So humility is one of the attributes that we women we can learn from this great woman. She was a great woman to her children as well. She gave her children the best of outbringing. And then Nana Khadija supported the Prophet financially and socially to spread the words of Allah. So if you are a wife or a mother, these are some of the good qualities of Khadija that you have to learn. Attribute is worth emulating, and for that matter, all Muslim women are supposed to learn some of her good qualities and exhibit as well. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.